Brian Koberger had an unusual online presence. Under the Reddit username criminology_student, he didn't post memes or join in on casual discussions like most Reddit users. Instead, he was focused, almost obsessively, on just one project. The posts started to appear in June of 2022, and they were framed as part of a research study. The tone was academic, even professional, yet something about them felt unsettling. His posts were directed at a very specific audience, people who had crossed the line into criminal behavior. These posts weren't just about gathering data, they seemed to probe deeper, seeking answers that most people wouldn't dare to ask. It read, "Hello, my name is Brian, and I am inviting you to participate in a research project that seeks to understand how emotions and psychological traits influence decision-making when committing a crime. In particular, this study seeks to understand the story behind your most recent criminal offense, with an emphasis on your thoughts and feelings throughout your experience. In the event that your most recent offense was not one that led to a conviction, you may still participate. Additional surveys are included after the open-ended section as to best understand your unique traits. The study should take about 15 to 20 minutes to fully complete. Your identity and all answers provided are completely confidential, and the link to the survey is also an anonymous link." This research has been approved by the DeSales University Institutional Review Board. Participants must be 18 years of age and older. If you opt to participate, you may terminate participation at any time and for any reason. Thank you for your time. Seemed simple enough, right? His posts alone weren't weird or a cause for concern. Reddit is frequently used as a source for people to fill in surveys or questionnaires. There's even a subreddit called Sample Size, with over 220,000 members, dedicated to research studies for school purposes or just general opinion polls. But he didn't post his request there. He posted directly into subreddits relating to prisons and ex-convicts, and the questions in the survey were just weird. After committing the crime, what were you thinking? How did you leave the scene? Before leaving, is there anything else you did? How did you accomplish your goal? Some users seemed curious, yet reserved about the survey itself. What made you interested in the felon experience? Are you trying to help or trying to get a degree? As a felon, I understand my moment will follow me for the rest of my life, but I did not expect to be treated like a lab rat. Brian replied saying, "I'm not a felon, but I teach in a prison and know some people with felonies in their personal life, and am often irked by some of the things people post in here." At first glance, it might have seemed like Brian was simply a passionate student, maybe just a bit overly ambitious in his approach to his studies. And so, nothing really came of it. As summer heat faded and autumn set in, his posts were soon forgotten as one of many on Reddit. Later that year, in the early hours of a chilly November morning, the small town of Moscow, Idaho, was thrown into a nightmare as 4 students were found dead in their off-campus home. Details emerged, reporting that each victim had been attacked with a knife repeatedly. The attack itself didn't come across as a random act of violence. It seemed deliberate and intentional. Yet, what baffled everyone, from local residents to law enforcement, was the complete lack of motive. They were just ordinary school students, and there was no reason why anyone could believe why they had been targeted in such a way. The task of discovering the killer was challenging. The crime scene was chaotic, with few initial clues pointing to a clear suspect. One of the first breakthroughs came when law enforcement began to analyze surveillance footage from the surrounding area. A white Hyundai Elantra, seen near the victim's house around the time of the murders, became a key focus. Investigators worked to trace the vehicle, identifying thousands of similar cars registered across the United States. This led them to Brian Koberger, a PhD criminology student at Washington State University, just across the border in Pullman, Washington. Cell phone data also placed him near the victim's home on several occasions, both before and after the attacks. This was a crucial element in building the case against him, showing a distinct pattern of behavior that just raised eyebrows. A knife sheath left at the crime scene provided a vital link to Koberger. Investigators were able to match DNA found on the sheath to a sample obtained from Koberger's family home in Pennsylvania, where he had traveled after the attacks. This genetic match provided the evidence needed to move forward with an arrest. On December 30th, 2022, a SWAT team arrived at Koberger's parents' house in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, where he was taken into custody without incident. Brian Koberger's arrest sent shockwaves not just through the community, but through the academic world as well. Here was a criminology PhD student, someone who had dedicated years to studying the minds of criminals, now accused of committing the kind of crime he had been researching. It's a twist that feels almost too dark to be true, yet the evidence seemed to suggest otherwise. Following Brian's arrest, the creepy Reddit threads made by Brian asking ex-cons about committing a crime went viral. People began to realize that Brian may have asked these questions months ago, not to gather research for his university studies, but to understand the best methods of escaping a crime. During the trial, the prosecution wasted no time in laying out their case. They argued that the attacks were methodical, done by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. They added that his actions weren't spontaneous or out of character. They were premeditated, the work of someone who understood how to avoid leaving behind evidence, someone who thought he could outsmart the system. On May 17, 2023, the Latah County District Court announced that Brian was indicted by a grand jury on 5 charges, 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. On June 26th, the prosecutor's office announced they were seeking the death penalty given the charges. Brian is being held in the Latah County Jail and has been denied bond. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges. On June 27, 2024, the judge set a trial date for June 2, 2025. To this day, we don't know if those surveys sent out by Brian were actually for his degree in education, or if he really was trying to determine the best way to commit such a crime and get away with it. Either way, it's incredibly creepy to look at. As I previously mentioned, there's no connection between the victims and Brian, and there's no motive as to why he committed these attacks. But the questions themselves are just incredibly odd, and him committing such an awful crime only months after posting the survey on Reddit seems to suggest that he was trying to craft the perfect escape plan. This is all, however, just purely speculation. His survey remains a mystery, and it'll probably stay that way forever. Imagine getting a call from your mum, out of the blue, asking you if you had a bug-out plan. In other words, an emergency evacuation plan to abandon your home due to an unexpected emergency situation. It's the kind of conversation that catches you off guard, especially when it's something you've never talked about before. This story on Reddit begins with exactly that. A mother calling her son with a warning she never expected to give. On Friday, October 5th, 2012, the OP posted the following. About 2 weeks ago, my mum called me to see if I had a bug-out plan, which is interesting because we've never talked about anything like this. We've discussed politics, religion, and various other issues, but nothing along the lines of, what do we do if the crap hits the fan? Her reasoning behind this is that her best friend of 37 years called her and said that her daughter and son-in-law were called into a private meeting on base regarding a probable evacuation scenario of the East Coast. Her son-in-law is in the Special Forces, apparently high up. I think the base was Fort McPherson in Georgia. From what she said, the daughter and son-in-law were brought in and made to sign a non-disclosure agreement saying they would tell no one, under the penalty of treason, what they were told during the meeting. They were told that in 4 to 6 weeks, this was around the 20th of September, the East Coast would experience some type of disaster that would cause it to be underwater. They were also told to make a go-bag and be prepared to leave at a moment's notice. That's about all I have. This does come from someone I trust, and someone who trusts her daughter and son-in-law. I don't see any reason for them to make it up or freak out over a routine or drill. From what my mum's friend says, the military doesn't do these types of drills without warning everyone that it's just a drill. She's been married to a military man for 20 years. On a separate note, one of my best friend's brother, who is in the Special Forces, went AWOL about 2 weeks ago. Went home to see his family in Texas, then disappeared. So, that's about it. Has anyone heard anything along these lines? I've heard that the East Coast is in for one hell of a winter, but that's all I've heard. Thoughts? The comment section was torn. On the one hand, you had people who just simply didn't believe him, with one user writing, "This is obviously some kid trying to get a response. Nothing will just trigger such an event so quickly. Sure, sea levels may rise in the future, but not anytime soon." On the other hand, there were others just being more cautious than anything else. Creepy. I forwarded this on to a few people. Hopefully, this isn't a troll. The OP did leave one comment on his post, writing, "I just want to say that when I posted this, I titled it hearsay for a reason. I'm not standing behind this information as much as I am wondering if anyone has heard anything similar. I don't frequent this subreddit, so I apologize if I came across as saying this as truth. My mum's friend has said that her daughter and son-in-law have not heard anything else after the meeting. They just have their go-bags. I will try to speak to my mum's friend directly so that I have a clearer understanding of what she heard from her daughter and son-in-law. Now, understandably, it's such a weird story to believe right off the bat, and the post itself was submitted to the conspiracy subreddit, which is bombarded with countless troll posts and memes on a daily basis. However, one major point to consider is the dates the post was submitted and the dates the OP posted within the thread. The post itself was submitted on Friday the 5th of October, 2012, and the OP mentioned that the daughter and son-in-law were told at around the 20th of September that in 4 to 6 weeks the East Coast would experience some type of disaster. This would give us rough dates between the 18th of October and the 1st of November. Between these dates, in 2012, Hurricane Sandy, an extremely large and destructive Category 3 Atlantic hurricane, ravaged the United States and surrounding areas. It was the largest Atlantic hurricane on record, with tropical storm force winds spanning 1,150 miles, inflicting nearly $70 billion in damage, and taking the lives of 254 from 8 different countries. Now, like I said, it really could be just one big coincidence. The user themselves doesn't have any post history, so the account itself must be a throwaway account. But the accuracy of their post and prediction of what was to happen is just incredibly uncanny. To make the story even weirder, the Westchester County ran a hurricane simulation back in 1997 to assess the effects of a hurricane hitting Long Island. What did they name the hurricane? Sandy. I don't know about you, but I absolutely love conspiracies like these. There really isn't any plausible explanation as to how the OP was so accurate in their prediction. Was it all just one elaborate troll post written to scare people within the subreddit? Or does the government know a lot more than they wish to tell? It's difficult to say, but coincidences like this really do make you wonder. Reddit is a huge online community where people talk about just about anything. But one of the most interesting things on the site is an AMA, or Ask Me Anything. It's where someone opens themselves up to questions from anyone on the internet. The cool thing about AMAs is that they can be done by just about anyone, from a famous actor to a person with an unusual job to someone with a really strange story to tell. You can get insights straight from the source, no filters, no fluff. What makes AMA so popular is the unpredictability. You never really know what you're going to get. Some AMAs are just casual chats, but others can be deeply personal, controversial, or even shocking. Now sometimes, someone pops up on an AMA that really catches people off guard. That's exactly what happened when Israfil Yilmaz, a soldier of sorts, showed up. The disturbing thing, though, is that Yilmaz wasn't just any soldier. His story was tied to something far more disturbing than anyone expected. Yilmaz was born in the Netherlands to a Turkish family, living what many would consider a typical life in Western Europe. His upbringing was a blend of Turkish culture and Dutch societal norms, allowing him to move easily between two worlds. He grew up fluent in Dutch, but he never lost touch with his Turkish roots, something that would play a significant role later in his life. Those who knew him described Yilmaz as intelligent, disciplined, and deeply committed to his beliefs, qualities that would serve him well when he joined the Dutch army. Serving as a professional soldier, Yilmaz quickly made a name for himself. He was dedicated, skilled, and respected by his peers. But as time went on, something in Yilmaz began to shift. His exposure to different cultures and conflicts through his military service might have sparked a sense of unease or disillusionment with his life in Europe. Slowly but surely, Yilmaz started turning his attention toward a more radical path, one that would ultimately change the course of his life forever. In 2013, Yilmaz made a decision that stunned everyone who knew him. He left the Netherlands and headed to Syria to join the Islamic State. But this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment choice. It was a decision driven by a newfound belief in jihadism. For Yilmaz, this decision marked a complete break from his past. He was no longer just a soldier. He was now a fighter for a cause that was in direct opposition to everything he had known before. He began to embrace this new identity wholeheartedly, sharing his experiences and beliefs on social media. His post painted a picture of life under ISIS that was both alluring and terrifying as he attempted to justify his actions and the group's cause. After joining ISIS and settling in Syria, Israfil Yilmaz didn't just disappear into the chaos of war. Instead, he took to social media, where he became something of a propagandist for the group. But the most surprising part of his online presence was his decision to engage directly with Reddit users through a series of AMAs. For a man in his position, this was a bold move, and it quickly drew the attention of the Reddit community. Yilmaz's first AMA was posted in the AMA subreddit, a place where people from all walks of life share their stories and answer questions. However, this AMA didn't last long. The moderators removed it shortly after it was posted, likely due to its controversial nature. In this brief session, Yilmaz shared his thoughts on a range of topics, including his harsh criticism of the Russian military's effectiveness in Syria. But with the post taken down quickly, this AMA didn't leave much of a mark on Reddit. Undeterred by the removal of his first AMA, Yilmaz tried again. This time, he posted in Casual AMA, a subreddit with fewer restrictions and a more relaxed atmosphere. This second AMA was far more successful. It garnered nearly 300 comments, with Redditors asking him a wide range of questions. Yilmaz answered many of these questions in surprising detail, offering insights into his life in Syria, his reasons for joining ISIS, and his thoughts on the ongoing conflict. One user asked if he owned a sabaya, or captive woman, to which he replied no, stating, "You need a bag of money to own a decent one." One user asked if he ever considered that he may be wrong, or that he will be the one that will end up in hell, even confirming that they are an ex-Muslim. He replies by saying, "Only God knows who of the believers is sincere and those who are wicked. The disbelievers going to hell speaks for itself. But you, as an ex-Muslim, are even worse, and so is the punishment that awaits the apostates." Now, of course, it's easy to assume this is all a hoax. Why would an IS member do an AMA? What purpose does it serve? The thing is, though, some users even left comments in Dutch who were skeptical of him being legitimate, with him responding in fluent Dutch, clearly showing he's capable of speaking the language, just like Yilmaz can. One other user even claims to be friends with Muslims who denounce the Islamic State, saying that it fully goes against Muslim teachings. He, however, disagrees, stating, "Not everybody who claims to be a Muslim actually understands the core meaning of being a Muslim in all aspects of life, and thus it's normal for those people to look at us and call us a bunch of barbarians, while all that we are doing is implementing the same beliefs they claim to believe in." If they would truly understand Islam and live according to it, their attitude towards us would be very different. The thread itself is quite lengthy, where he answers quite a few questions, but the AMA eventually drew to a close. That would be until his third and final AMA showed up. He claimed he was back for round 2, writing, "I've been gone for quite some time now, but God willing, I'll be answering questions now that I have some free time on my hands." But unfortunately for him, he never would answer any more questions. Israfil Yilmaz, the Turkish Islamist militant from the Netherlands, would be attacked via an airstrike on the ISIS stronghold of Raqqa in the north of Syria. Rumours have speculated as to whether that attack did end his life, as he's never returned to the internet since, but this has never been confirmed. The threads themselves, though, are still creepy to read through, as it shows you the twisted mind of someone who's been brainwashed. In an ironic twist, in his final thread he wrote, "God willing, I'll be answering some questions." But I guess God just wasn't feeling that willing on that fateful day. You know that feeling when something just isn't right in your own home? It starts small, maybe a noise you can't quite place, or a chill that runs down your spine when you're alone. It's easy to dismiss at first, to tell yourself it's just your imagination. But what if it's not? Our final post takes us to the Let's Not Meet subreddit, where a user tells her incredibly horrifying story of her weird neighbour. So, around 10 to 12 years ago in England, I lived in a little 2-bedroom house on a long road. It is a terraced house on a long strip of other terraced houses. Back in the day, all the attics were joined and you could literally travel through them. Years later, they realised it was a bad idea, fires spreading, burglars, etc. And so all the attics were bricked up so each house was secure. One night, I was soaking in the bath when I heard a noise above me. Thinking it may be an animal or something, I just ignored it. This went on for a few weeks, only it was getting to the point I would only hear the noise when I was in the bath or shower or getting changed. I got a friend to check the attic, and he told me he didn't see anything. He just stuck his head inside, which just confirmed my animal story. Not much happened after that for about a month or two, when one night I was alone. I was getting ready to take a shower as I was heading out with friends. I heard the same noise above, when all of a sudden, the dog started going crazy, barking and looking directly above me. Clearly I was freaked out and decided to get ready at a friend's house. The next day, I was outside my house when the neighbour shouted me. Now, my neighbour is creepy as hell, small, stinky, strange looking with a hint of crazy in his eyes. He asked if I was okay. Being polite and trying to show him he doesn't really bother me, I said yes and went about my business. Just as I got to my door, he asked if I got to my friends okay. At first, without thinking, I said yes thank you, smiled and waved goodbye. When I got inside my house, I realised that he would not know I was at a friend unless he heard me on the phone, and as I was so creeped out the night previously, I was practically whispering to my friend. Anyway, I rang family members, told my dad, and they all came round. They turned the lights on in the bathroom, but kept all the other lights off. They opened the attic door and you could see 2 lights shining right through to the top of the attic. 2 tiny little holes. My bathroom ceiling was quite dark, so I never noticed them. My dad went in. He was gone a while, but when he returned, he was blazing angry. He ignored everyone and walked straight outside to the neighbour's house. We heard him shouting for the neighbour to open the door, but he wasn't home. I asked my cousin to go up to check it out. When he came back down, he told me that the wall separating the attics had been knocked through. Most of the brickwork was on my side, so it was knocked through from the other side. We called the police, but they told us that there was no proof he had done anything. The neighbour told the police he never used the attic, and the previous tenants may be to blame. Clearly, he was to blame, the old dirty pervert. I don't think I have ever been so disturbed, knowing that the dirty pervert had been watching me for all that time. I never stayed in that house again. It's a creepy story to say the least, and one that, to be honest, isn't that hard to believe. There's so many cases of creepy people just stalking and acting inappropriately, and I'm glad to hear that she never stayed in that house again. I just dread to think what the neighbour might continue to do once a new person were to move in.